At the moment, if I had to put money on it, I think they'd probably vote to stay in. But I think it would be driven by fear, not by rational thinking.
When you say we'll vote to stay in,
Pardon?
when you say we'll vote to stay in, I assume you're talking about the next government.
No, I'm saying if there was a referendum tomorrow on the European Union, in or out.
That doesn't matter, does it?
No, but it matters in the context of how the British public feel about
The
things.
only thing which matters with respect is winning the next election, which we have not talked about. This party and the Labour Party are averaging votes to UKIP. I know many Conservative people being Conservatives all their life and tonight are not. The most important issue facing this room, facing you, sir, and the Prime Minister, is when the next election are getting to grips with UKIP. How are you going to do that? And how are we going to do that?
Well,
so let's start talking about...
Can I just emphasise again, sir, this is not a party political event.
Well, what's the point in talking about things when the elections... It's a year away, and
well,
we have to win it.
Because this is me here as the Member of Parliament. There could be many people in here who vote Labour and vote Liberal, and I'm their MP as well. And so therefore I can't... I can have the conversation with you after, sir, about what I think we should do.
I think the parties should be having a conversation, and they're not having it.
No, I think that they are, trust me, at Westminster, the Westminster Village, all they ever talk about is UKIP, trust me. But the point is that in this environment, this event, I don't want to get drawn into talking about the Conservative Party's response to UKIP, because I don't think it's appropriate in this environment. But I'm interested, I just don't want to do it here.
In which case, then, I feel very disappointed that you say that you don't care. If this is okay, if you say that this is not party political, and this is to do with you, and you represent us, I'm bitterly disappointed that you say that you think that you don't care. And that is the problem, because you're representative of the government. We don't believe that the government is listening about UKIP. Now, most of us know that UKIP don't stand a chance of forming a particularly great party. I think they know that they can't form a government. But what they're doing is they're speaking for everybody, and you're not listening. You're saying, you just stood up there and said, I don't think people really care.
Can I come back on this?
They really,
can I just I just want to correct you, okay? What I said was, I didn't think people cared about Europe and the way that it worked. Well, with respect, madam, with respect, having had hundreds of thousands of email communications and tens of thousands of letters, and having knocked on in excess of 5 figures of doors in this constituency, I can probably count on one hand the number of times people have talked to me about the institutions of Europe. What comes up is a concern about immigration, concern about the future, concern about the economy, welfare, and everything else. So in terms of the issues that matter to people in this constituency, Europe and how it works is down here. And allow me to describe that as not caring too much. Okay? At the top are people's economic position. Essentially, do they feel secure in their jobs? Can they afford to live? Can they buy a house? Can their children afford homes? These things matter much, much more. Now, where you're right is that there is undeniably a disenchantment with mainstream political parties. There is undeniably a collapse in membership of mainstream political parties. Undeniably, there is a mood of anti-politics in general, somewhat fed by the expensive scandal of 2009, the reason I'm here. Now, I agree with all of that. I was specifically saying they didn't care about the structure of Europe, of Commission, of Parliament, and everything else. And I tell you what, when you see the turnout, I think you'll find that most people won't even bother voting. Okay, but you're right that I think political parties, this applies to all of them, need to become more relevant and need to listen more, stop being so inward in Westminster, looking in, worrying about silliness, and actually start talking about stuff that actually matters to people. But in response to that, if the parties do that, the public actually do have a responsibility in a democracy to participate, to to be active. And I'm not so sure that any of us are doing a particularly good job at the moment, to be blunt. And I try and have tried these public meetings, madam. Try to find out how many MPs do this, and you will find it isn't many. In fact, I don't know of many colleagues in the Conservative Party who do this. I'm struggling to think. Actually, I know of a few.
Well, and you're right, and the reason I've come is because I want to hear how you're going to influence that.
Well, I do try to influence it. I do participate. I try to have an independent mind, and I stand up on certain issues. Syria intervention being one of them. There have been a couple of others. We have a party political system, though, madam, and it's you know, I get to have the privilege of being your member of parliament because I'm the Conservative candidate for the general election 2010 and will be for 2015. And so there is an element of you, there's a loyalty to party. I stand on a manifesto, otherwise I wouldn't be an MP. So there is a tension about taking your concerns and indeed the concerns of 77,000 other people who have the right to vote in this constituency and reflecting those concerns in Parliament, to my party, to the leader, marrying that with the concerns of my local association, who ultimately have the responsibility to nominate me as the candidate, and also marrying it with my own instincts and views. It's difficult, madam.
I'm sure.
It's difficult. But I do try, and this is part of this, I do try to communicate and get over to people that I'm actually, you know, who I am, that I'm generally decent, you know, prepared to listen. But the democracy is a two-way street. It's a two-way deal. And I think politicians haven't been doing a particularly great job, but I also think the public have become a bit, I don't know, a bit lazy around politics, taking it for granted.
It's always been true. And
Yeah, but I worry. I know, but I worry about this.
We had this debate on the other day between Farage and OK, and everyone was voting on how well it went. And it was just a joke, there were no facts. We don't have the facts. It's so easy to create a website. Create a website that shows all the facts.
Yep.
Here's the things that we want people to know,
Yep.
and here are the facts, and this is how
Yes.
we can decide. We're always...
But discovering the truth isn't always necessarily easy. The first thing. Secondly, getting the truth to you, the interface between me via media, both old and new, to you, isn't straightforward. If you put something into Google, for example, its ranking is decided by them. So I could have put a website up with all the facts. You don't see it, do you? How often do you go beyond page 2 on a search on a subject matter? The same with the BBC. There's a bit of a sieve going on there about information. Wherever you go, it's extremely difficult to get information over. I've got my own website, okay? I put infographics on it. I'm not sure many people check it out. I get Google Analytics. You know, it's there.
I disagree with you on media. I think that's one of the downfalls of our constituents. Because I know 3 councillors who've actually turned around and say they don't believe in social media. Now, literally, on the way here, I was being Facebook updated on the gypsies travelling from Jennings Park, who are currently trying to get into TRL at this moment. That wouldn't happen if we didn't have social media. And you need to talk to the party, its members and the ward councillors about using it wisely and communicating.
Sure, and we can always do better on these things, but forgive me, trying to govern in circumstances where the public are being direct messaged about the movement of the travelling community, that's difficult.
Well, that as I said, that's happening now.
That's really, but trying to respond, I mean, who's working in Borough Council or at Bracknell Forest Council this evening to respond to that?
Well, the police are involved now as well. But the fact is that we know where they are.
Sure,
right
but
now.
I worry that those of us in political office are going to spend their entire lives communicating and not thinking.
No, it's not it's.
I mean, that's my concern about it.
You get your ward members to communicate and listen to their constituents, because 3 of them have turned around and said they don't believe in social media, Facebook, Twitter.
Okay. Well, I mean, there are councillors in the room. I don't know if they're the ones you're referring to. I will let them. You know, maybe you can speak to them later on about it. I do tweet. I don't tweet all the time.
Well, I wouldn't expect. I expect.
But I try to tweet some things, and it's you know, it's really difficult to manage the communication demands in my office. I mean, the publication that you've got on your seats, if you look at the page on the numbers of emails, letters signed, and all that sort of stuff, you know, we're set up to fail at Westminster on that front, and it's very, very difficult. Yeah. Yeah, to who though?
To your ward councillors.
Yeah.
And
well, okay, I'll think about that. One of them has just put his hand up.
Completely different subject, Philip. HS2. I know you rebelled against it, and I applaud you for that, because I'm personally not supportive of HS2. It looks like a hugely expensive exercise. I hope I don't upset any Brummies here, but I don't actually see the need to get to Birmingham 20 minutes quicker.
Where you just now.
Yeah. The question is, obviously a very clear vote in Parliament. Is it definitely going to happen?
As currently, the party's position of the Central Labour Party are in favour of the project. So yes. My hunch is, though, is that if the polls are to be believed at the moment, the Conservatives are losing next year. Okay? Following the polls, follow it through, you have Ed Miliband as your Prime Minister. Okay? Now, if that happens, I suspect it won't go ahead. And the reason is that it is pretty evident that there is going to be a massive demand for money to go into the health service and to further prop up the welfare system. I mean, it's sort of 20 billion sort of territory for the rest of the decade. And I just think that the Labour Party will say, do you know what, let's just connect the northern cities and leave it at that. That's my hunch. I don't have the inside track. But yes, as it currently stands, we're going ahead with this. £50 billion at 2011 prices. Bear that in mind, that 50 billion figure is at 2011 prices, so just think what it will be in 2025. And I didn't support it. There's an article in the paper this week about local paper this week about it. To me, I would put energy generation, like nuclear reactors or whatever you wanted to build. I would put it in a hub airport, decent one, 4 runways, not 3, so that we can be connected with those parts of the world that we can't enter into free trade agreements with. And I would also do a new network of acute hospitals as well. I would put that ahead of a train. The point you make is fair about the speed. I don't quite understand when you're travelling domestically, either for personal or business reasons, why now, when you have a mobile phone, laptop with Wi-Fi, whether it makes any difference whether you get to somewhere 15 minutes quicker or not. Don't you just read something more? Don't you just do a few more emails if you're at work? Do you not just do a few more telephone calls? The capacity issue, well, change the signalling system, lengthen the platforms, put on more carriages. Some have even suggested double-decking the carriages and making differences to the tunnels along the way. And ultimately, there is always domestic air flight, and before anybody screams green at me, planes are becoming more and more fuel efficient. And if we honestly think that we're going to address the global challenge around carbon by trimming a bit of domestic air transport, I'm sorry, if you think that, you're not understanding the wider issue. The bigger issue is that the Chinese are building huge numbers of coal-fired power stations, as are now the Germans, because they've cancelled their nuclear power sector. So, and the Russians flare more gas per year than Norway produces. Okay, so cutting out a few planes to Manchester are going to address the carbon challenge. And I'm somebody who believes in climate change being caused predominantly by man, by the way. But the idea of that, I'm sorry, is a nonsense. So, yeah, it was not a project I could support. It was a lot of money, and it just wasn't the right priority for me. And, oh yeah, fibre optic cabling, which I know is a sensitive issue around here. I'd have that to every home and business in the country. You know, that is fast data, the future, not fast people. Anyway.
It's wonderful, is it? Everybody thinks it is.
James Park's come up, so I guess someone's got to ask this question of where you stand with travel.
Well, actually, can I mention Europe again without anyone groaning? There is an issue around the travelling stroke gypsy community being diagnosed as a minority group under the European Human Rights Act, and therefore being entitled to certain things as a consequence, okay? Which is why we have these problems and why I get the constant refrain on doorsteps. How come I can't do this? How come they can do this and I can't do this? And it's to do with the European Human Rights legislation. Okay, so again, I go back to those of you in the room who are, you know, I know the Human Rights legislation was actually written by a Brit to try and prevent another Auschwitz. It has now it's morphed into something that is much more than the original author wanted it to be. And again, yes, I would leave it because it's being abused. We need to start again, okay? But in specific answer to your question, I think that people are free to do whatever they want, but I also think that people should pay the way and obey the law. Okay, and I don't think that whether somebody wants to live in a caravan on a field or whether somebody wants to live in a bungalow, I think they should be subject to the same laws of the land and pay the same taxes and have the same, you know. So that's the broader point, and I wish we would change all the necessary legislation to achieve that. Specifically, the Lower Sandhurst Lane case that's been rumbling on. Simon Weeks knows more about this, as does Ian Pittock. The situation with that one was that the land that was purchased, that's now that boat's left the harbour. But what we're trying to do is I've written to the Minister to try to get him to call back some other cases. I'm looking at Simon for some guidance.
One on the rise and one normal to that.
Yeah, in order to set a precedent locally so that we can't have a replication of what happened in this case in Lower Sandhurst Lane. All right. So we've been on it as best we can. We still await a decision from the Minister. I'm looking for Simon, and we still haven't had. No, but it's soonish. And if we can achieve this, if we can do this, then the issues around where they're travelling to become less difficult for us. Okay, so we are aware of it, but the broader issues that I alluded to at the start, I want to see us address and be very, very robust about it. Actually.
It's interesting, isn't it, that in Ireland, the Garda have the right to remove the travellers who come onto the verges. In fact, if they fail to move on, they remove and finish and flatten the caravans. So it's time we did something like that here to stop this, because they leave such a mess behind.
I agree with you. I don't know how Ireland does that when it's. I think it's a signatory as well, the way we are. Again, I get back to the slight differences as you go around the continent. Anyway, I agree with you. I remember there was a football pitch near to where I grew up, and they got onto the pitch, and it cost £25,000. It was a parish council. It was when I was in Beaconsfield Town Council. It was about £25,000–30,000 because there was human excrement all over the football pitch that the under-11s and under-12s were playing on. And so they had to have it properly cleaned and tidied up. And I'm sorry, I don't. If people want to live like that, that's fine, but do it within the law and do it with respect for the great majority of people who adhere to those laws.
In France, I gather the local mayor will instruct the local police chief to send his officers out in cars to test their sirens at about 3 in the morning. And after about 3 nights, they move on somewhere else. Now that we have local PCCs, perhaps that would be...
Yeah, I'll make that suggestion too. The other issue around this is that what constitutes a traveller? Who is actually a member of that community, in inverted commas? I'm not convinced about the qualification for membership. A number of people from those communities have been my patients in the past, and I'm not so sure. There are people who drop out of society, I think, who suddenly become travellers, and I think it's an area that I think we really do need to get to grips with, because it gets back to the sort of disillusionment that people have with the political process, i.e. people can see something and think, well, how can this be happening? How can we have to put up with this? And the politicians don't do anything about it. Well, it's about time. I think that we were much more robust about it. I know that within the constraints of national law, the councils do the very best they can. I know that. But I do wonder whether we need to, again, I think it's about European human rights. I think we may need to step away from that in order to deal with this problem. Yeah.
A question about schooling in this area and free schools. Popular area, successful schools, and we need lots more of them, but the government policy says all new schools have got to be free schools, which may or may not be a good thing, but it does, unfortunately, first of all, it penalises successful LEAs in this area, and secondly, it leads to very sort of lumpy distribution of where the schools turn up, because free schools, of course, can decide to have their own admissions policies. So would you agree that it kind of discriminates against successful LEA areas who can't basically put more schools which they need to support a very growing population and obviously new housing as well?
Sure. My